Hello, and welcome to M4LU, presented by Moms for Liberty. We're here to translate complex topics into more easily understood content, giving you, the parents, grandparents, and every American citizen, the key facts and information you need to empower you to fight back against government overreach, especially as it impacts our kids in schools. Hi, I'm Missy Karwowski, Program Director of M4LU. Each month, we'll focus on a single topic, ideology, or issue that impacts our kids, schools, and communities. We'll approach it from multiple angles, starting with a 101 intro lecture, followed by a 102 course that goes a little deeper on the topic. If available, we'll do a virtual watch party of a film relating to the topic, and finally culminate with a monthly book club discussion. Best of all, every event will have live Q&A with experts in the field to help us make sense of it all. We understand this can be a lot to digest, but don't worry, we've got your back. You'll find a corresponding toolkit in the resource library at m4lu.org. In addition to recordings of all monthly events, each toolkit will include a curated SmartBook, presentation slides that can be used at chapter meetings, related white papers, articles, podcasts, and so much more. Now, before we get started, just a few housekeeping items. Depending on what device you are using, there should be an audience chat and Q&A feature at the right of your screen. Please comment, interact with your fellow audience members, and be sure to submit those questions to our amazing guests. It is so valuable to get this direct interaction with them, so please take advantage of it. As a warning, rude or demeaning comments will get you removed from this event, and you will not be permitted to re-enter. Now, of course, the legal reminder that the opinions of the guests and any media content shared are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of M4LU or Moms for Liberty. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please like, share, and subscribe to help spread the word and support our mission. We try to keep our resources affordable and accessible to all, but if you would like to donate, please visit m4lu.org. Thank you again. Now let's jump over to the event. Hello, and welcome back to M4LU. In May, we have been learning about comprehensive sexuality education, or CSE. Now, as we've learned so far in CSE 101 and 102, this is actually far from what most people think of when they hear the term sex ed. It is sex ed, but sex ed for social change. It is an intentional agenda to restructure society. The foundation of today's sex ed was laid on the so-called research of Alfred Kinsey, which we learned a little bit more about in CSE 102. And it is proactively pushed by Planned Parenthood, CCUS, and the UN, as you'll see tonight. The War on Children exposes this horrible curriculum that seeks to undermine the family and sexualize children. So thank you again for joining us tonight. And without further ado, M4LU is proud to present Family Watch International's The War on Children.
In this film, the term Comprehensive Sexuality Education, or CSE, does not refer to sex education programs in general, but rather to a specific form of graphic sexuality education. CSE is designed to change the sexual and gender norms of society, promotes high-risk sexual behaviors, and encourages even the youngest of children to experiment sexually. For the protection of the viewer, explicit images from CSE text that will be shown have been blurred out. However, the subject matter is still not appropriate for children.
This is definitely an attack on healthy family life. It will affect your economy. It will affect your child rearing. It will affect your education system.
This has horrified a lot of people in South Africa. And the tool that is being used, the weapons that are being used, is comprehensive sexuality education.
As president of the American College of Pediatricians, I am deeply concerned about comprehensive sexuality education for 4 reasons. First, it sexualizes children. Second, it threatens children's health. Third, it promotes a dangerous gender ideology. And fourth, it undermines the parent-child relationship, which violates parental rights.
My life's work has been to protect children by exposing the roots of the sexual revolution, the sexual rights movement that's led to sex education worldwide, globally.
Say not to CSC! Say not to CSC! Say not to CSC!
There is a worldwide war raging across the globe. Not a war of guns and weapons, but a war of ideas, ideologies, and worldviews regarding sex.
This is just part of the lesson plan for what's called Making a Difference curriculum, and it is in Oregon schools and probably schools around the nation. This is instructions for the teacher in the classroom to ask her or his students, how do people express their sexual feelings? What is abstinence? And here are some answers that they try to elicit from the children. Oral sex, masturbation, anal sex, massage, holding hands, touching each other's genitals, saying, I like you. And what they're doing is equating all these things. Saying, I like you is equal to anal sex.
Planned Parenthood is coming into classrooms of students who are 13 and 14 years old. They're giving them handouts, negotiating sexual encounters with other students. For example, there are statements like this: do you want to go back to my room? Do you want to get busy? Can I take your shirt off? It makes me hot when you touch me. Here, can you do that? Is it okay if I take my pants off? This is outrageous. This should not be taught in the classroom.
We are state legislators from Minnesota, and we are pushing hard against the agenda to sexualize our children.
Minnesota is on the leading edge of this radical agenda, and we're trying our best to fight against it.
They're pushing a comprehensive sexual education agenda, including the book, It's Perfectly Normal.
It is pornography. It is something that even some of my colleagues, men especially on the House floor, did not want to look at. Showing children as young as 4th grade. In fact, it's recommended for 4th graders as their comprehensive sex education. We couldn't show this on the television news, but yet we want our 4th grade children to be looking at this book.
When a child looks at a pornographic image, within 0.3 of a second, that's imprinted on his brain and her brain permanently. We know that there's an action that takes place which is called mirroring images, so that children will want to or will act out what they see. In the name of sexuality education, children are seeing obscene materials that have been ruled by Congress and by the Supreme Court impossible to show to children.
Where we in Latin America, we still have a lot of poverty. We have communities that don't have fresh water, that don't have electricity, children that cannot finish even primary school. Focus is completely shifted from basic needs to this very idealized agenda. They get comprehensive sexual education without the consent of parents, taking and deconstructing also the family.
They have really concerning campaigns for children. The strongest one is we demand sexual education, impossible to live without it. One of them is called Put It On. They have elementary students as young as 9 years old. Then they teach them how to wear a condom. And they have this plastic genitalia, and they even have young girls. They're teaching them how to put a condom on a male genitalia and boys how to put a condom on a woman's genitalia without the knowledge and consent of the parents.
Most people are unaware that International Planned Parenthood Federation, also known as IPPF, is one of the largest providers of graphic, comprehensive sexuality education programs. With 65,000 service points in over 170 countries, this should concern governments and parents everywhere.
My brother Luigi and I had an opportunity to go to the United Nations and give a speech on the UN floor. First, my brother explained about how we became orphans when both of our parents died of AIDS. I told him how Planned Parenthood was passing out a booklet for HIV-positive youth at the United Nations called Healthy, Happy, and Hot. This is for the kids who have AIDS. The booklet says its purpose, and I quote, to support your sexual pleasure. It tells youth they can have sex in different ways. It teaches about sexual pleasure through masturbation, with same-sex partners, and even if you are drunk.
One of the most disturbing things I think that I've ever seen as a physician, this pamphlet called Healthy, Happy, and Hot, put out by International Planned Parenthood Federation, tells young people, and you have the right not to disclose your HIV status to a sexual partner if you're not comfortable.
I was just so offended at the booklet that Planned Parenthood put out, inviting people living with HIV to engage in the very acts that would harm them.
It's all about rights instead of health. It also tells young people that are HIV positive that if they decide with their partner not to wear a condom, that's their decision. It's just this kind of information, it's so unbelievable to me as a physician.
This kind of message was a death sentence to not only both of my parents, but also my brother Rogerio.
I couldn't understand how a pro-abortion or abortion service provider in the United States of America was in South Africa and promoting the homosexual lifestyle. Here we're trying to protect young people from getting HIV/AIDS, and we're promoting a lifestyle that is very high risk.
In Guatemala, an affiliate of Planned Parenthood is huge. They have more than 2,600 service points, 27 permanent clinics, and 5 mobile units.
Planned Parenthood became very active in the 90s in Russia after the collapse of Soviet Union. They would provide textbooks for the Russian Ministry of Education and penetrate the official educational networks. Some of those textbooks were really bad and tried really to sexualize children.
The Swedish Planned Parenthood presented a film of about 30 minutes, an animated film which is addressed to young people of 13 to 14 years old. It is called Sex on the Map. In this film, the young people are taught that anything is okay as long as you agree and it feels right for you.
International Planned Parenthood Federation, especially in the Latin American region, is omnipresent. Be it at the mission at the United Nations, the person, for example, working on the actual language, drafting the document, is a direct International Planned Parenthood affiliate. We see the same thing in the Mexican government. They're usually the #1 advisor, be it to the mission. They have a direct influence on the outcome documents, on what is established, what is negotiated at the UN.
Planned Parenthood is one of the largest organizations in the world pushing sexual health and reproductive rights. What they mean by that is not so much about reproducing. It's not about health care for babies, for mothers who want to have babies. It's trying to prevent the birth of babies.
Many of the key players that are advisors to the representatives of various countries, they're actually directly linked to International Planned Parenthood Federation. It's really striking how International Planned Parenthood Federation plays such a big role, and what we just can't put our finger on is how that happened.
Margaret Sanger, the founder of Planned Parenthood Federation, she was part of the eugenics movement that she referred to black people as the weeds of society. She believed in this ideology that the weak people in society should be weeded out.
They masquerade themselves as, an agency here to help Africa plan its population. What they're trying to do is to suppress the African population.
They do it through education, making sure that whatever reproductive health care is wanted is in the direction of not having children.
The It's All One curriculum, also promoted by International Planned Parenthood, reveals the multiple manipulative tactics used to indoctrinate and sexualize children through CSE. Like other CSE programs, It's All One claims, among other things, to be evidence-based, comprehensive, human rights, gender-sensitive, and culturally appropriate education that will increase young people's responsible decision-making, to reduce adolescent rates of pregnancy and sexually transmitted infections, including HIV. It's All One, however, like most CSE programs, is really just cleverly disguised abortion rights, sexual pleasure education, masquerading as human rights, gender, and sexual and reproductive health education. It indoctrinates youth in radical feminist ideologies regarding power, privilege, and equality. It aggressively promotes abortion with 112 references to abortion, manipulating young minds using scare tactics, telling girls, Every minute of every hour, a pregnant girl is dying, so we need to legalize abortion. Students are then required to read stories of girls who have had abortions so they can learn to walk in her shoes in the decision to have an abortion. Like other CSE programs, It's All One has an obsessive focus on sexual pleasure, mentioning sexual pleasure 62 times. It promotes multiple sex acts, the idea that one sexual practice is not better or worse than another, and instructs children on how to stimulate themselves or their partner to orgasm. Children are also asked to read personal stories about feeling sexually attracted to someone of the same sex. It also helps students identify the skills they need to be able to negotiate comfortable sexual relationships, and claims there is no right age to have sex, and that each person has to determine when he or she feels ready to have sex. To explore their readiness, children fill out a worksheet that infers children are ready to have sex when they are feeling close to the other person, when both of you want to have sex, when you are feeling sexually attracted to the other person, and when you are feeling comfortable about telling the other person what feels good sexually. It teaches that human rights encompass sexual rights, including alleged rights to all persons to sexual expression and the right to seek sexual pleasure. Students are also given a list of problems they can work on or advocate for, such as adolescents don't have access to sexual and reproductive health services, and where abortion is illegal, it is dangerous. It's All One curriculum has been in high demand since it was launched several years ago at the United Nations, with requests coming from more than 150 countries and from every state in the United States. This program has been taught to children across the world. It can be difficult to understand why any organization would promote promiscuity and high-risk sexual behaviors to children through comprehensive sexuality education. However, hooking children on sex is a multi-billion-dollar business for Planned Parenthood and other similar organizations. This is because children, or prospects, once sexualized, become Planned Parenthood customers dependent upon their services, and then are turned into peer advocates or educators, recruiting other young people as peer educators to generate even more customers for Planned Parenthood. Some of the lucrative, youth-friendly services Planned Parenthood and their partners provide include sexual and reproductive health counseling, contraceptive counseling, including emergency contraception, abortion services, sexually transmitted infections, including HIV prevention, treatment, and counseling, and now they even provide transgender hormone services. Planned Parenthood aggressively and quite successfully lobbies governments and the United Nations for millions of dollars annually to fund their multiple services and programs, including CSE. Some of their top executives receive high six-figure salaries, yet most governments are completely unaware of their true sexual agenda.
Just looking into the next years in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals that determines the agenda for the next 15 years, the voice is very, very biased. It's just International Planned Parenthood Federation and their affiliates who actually make the suggestions.
The United Nations is also aggressively pushing CSE for children worldwide. A prime example of this is the International Guidelines on Sexuality Education, published by UNESCO in cooperation with UNFPA. Some of the objectives of the UNESCO Sexuality Education Guidelines include teaching children, among other things, at age 5, that masturbation is not harmful, at age 9, about sexual stimulation and the definition and function of orgasm, at age 12, about respect for different sexual orientations and gender identities, and at age 15, that both men and women can receive sexual pleasure with a partner of the same or opposite sex.
When I got to the UN behind closed doors, I was really shocked. Comprehensive sexuality education, which was being pushed at us, really meant encouraging children to experiment sexually.
The comprehensive sexuality education is presented as a silver bullet that would solve all the problems. It's seen as the index to economic growth, as a solution to poverty, as a solution to everything.
Even more disturbing are the World Health Organization standards for sexuality education in Europe. These standards actually suggest that children ages 0 to 4 should be given information about enjoyment and pleasure when touching one's body parts or masturbation, and given the right to explore their gender identities. For ages 4 to 6, children should be taught about same-sex relationships and respect for different norms regarding sexuality. For ages 9 to 12, the differences between gender identity and biological sex and about their sexual rights as defined by International Planned Parenthood Federation. And finally, for ages 15 and up, children should learn to celebrate sexual differences, about violations of their sexual rights, and their alleged right to abortion. The UN's Children's Agency, UNICEF, also promotes comprehensive sexuality education, and as far back as 1999, UNICEF was also found to be promoting the sexual pleasure agenda. For example, on page 89 of a UNICEF-published Sexual and Reproductive Health Manual for Pregnant Teens in Mexico, UNICEF listed situations in which one can obtain sexual pleasure that included sexual responses directed towards inanimate objects, animals, minors, and non-consenting persons.
The way they're doing this is to actually penetrate our schools. And so once it changes at the policy level, then we'll probably have no control over what is taught in the schools and who teaches it.
An online CSE program for African youth called The World Starts With Me tells children that sexuality includes French kissing, oral sex, and masturbation. It then tells them it's their own choice if they want to lose their virginity. It shows children pictures of naked girls and boys in various stages of development, and then asks them to point out differences in their private parts. Parents likely will never know, as it is all done online away from home. This program has been found in Kenya, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Ghana, and is probably in many other African countries.
We have had several high-level visits to Jamaica and the Caribbean from Prime Minister David Cameron of the UK, from the Secretary General of the UN Ban Ki-moon, and from President Barack Obama. This is about pressuring the Caribbean to accept the sexual rights campaign.
Letters have been written, try to get the Nigerian delegation to actually yield in matters of comprehensive sexuality education.
The UN is for all countries, great and small. As such, it should not be used as a platform to advocate tendencies, ideologies, or ways of life that are at variance with its core principles and mandates.
Many times we're cornered by other delegations seeking to impose a radical sexual agenda.
We were confronted with a text that was replete with controversial issues, extremely divisive in nature.
The Nigerian government was actually told by the Western countries that if they do not give in, that they will be denied foreign aid.
Let me express serious concerns regarding UNFPA's attempt to discredit the government of Nauru and its permanent mission to the United Nations during these negotiations. UNFPA has tried to convince my country to change our positions on issues such as reproductive rights and comprehensive sexuality education. Harassing my capital or going through UNFPA's regional office in the Pacific will not change my country's position. Madam Chair, does the UNFPA think it can do this because Nauru is the smallest member state of the United Nations?
The interests of organizations like UNFPA and IPPF is to get parents out of the picture and to radicalize and sexualize children. At the UN, if parental rights is being proposed in a document, it's thrown out.
A report by the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Right to Education, issued to the UN General Assembly, claimed that children have a right to comprehensive sexuality education, aimed, among other things, at abolishing guilt feelings about eroticism, and that will teach about the importance of sexual diversity.
In comprehensive sexuality education, the approach is to celebrate sexual freedom or sexual license, to celebrate experimenting from a medical perspective. When sexual freedom is the priority, then sexual health is going to suffer. You just can't have it both ways.
If a sexual education program is teaching a child or leading a child towards multiple sexual relations, early introduction to sexual intercourse, it is, by the data, a public form of sexual abuse. Out-of-wedlock births are going to skyrocket. They're going to have many more abortions. They're going to have much more STDs. The probability of depressions and anxiety directly out of matters sexual increase very significantly.
So our country had a secret visit from the U.S. Special Envoy for LGBT rights, Mr. Randy Berry. He was accompanied by the senior LGBT coordinator for USAID, Mr. Todd Larkin, to try and see what the Jamaican climate was regarding sexual rights and how they could influence change. We were able to notify the public about this visit and to send a very clear message to the U.S. government that Jamaica will not be pressured into changing our values and our culture that protects the family.
The Center for Disease Control, in their own research, shared information that 2% of the population of the US are men who have sex with men. And of that 2%, they account for 68% of the HIV infection. And the government of the United States spends $12 billion annually just to take care of that. I actually had to say to them that Jamaica cannot afford to spend that kind of money.
One of the handouts that concerns me the most is called the Genderbread Person. They teach that gender is a spectrum, that you can choose to be whatever you want. You could be all female one day and the next day feel like you're neither female or male.
Frankly, it's confusing. It's mental molestation. We're confusing these kids as to what they are.
The greatest medical fraud in history is to tell someone that they can change gender. I lived as Laura Jensen for 8 years. I discovered that biologically it is categorically impossible to change a man into a woman. My life was completely torn apart.
We have a whole specialty in medicine called gender-specific medicine. Did you know there's male and female kidneys, male and female hearts? If there's a woman who needs a kidney transplant, she will do better with a kidney transplant from a woman, because a kidney from a male, every cell in that kidney is going to have a Y chromosome. When we prescribe medications now, is this patient male or female? Because the reaction to the medication may differ.
Leading young children down the path of puberty blockers, cross-sex hormones, and mutilating surgeries places them at a greater risk of developing high blood pressure, stroke, heart attacks, cancer, relationship problems, anxiety, depression, and suicide as adults.
There are laws in Oregon where children as young as 15 can get taxpayer-funded sex changes without parental consent. You can't have an aspirin at school without parental consent. However, a student could make these life-altering, permanent decisions without their parental knowledge or consent.
The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of the American Psychiatric Association reports that as many as 98% of boys who are confused about their identity will come to accept their biological sex by the time they are adults, as long as they are not encouraged in their confusion.
They're tampering with the core identity of these young people and confusing them.
This is the enemy of my children and my grandchildren. And it's digging down into the core of being male and female, of our identity as persons, of our family life, of our children.
The Minnesota State High School League created policy in sports which broke down the barriers of what gender identity actually is. They are no longer allowed to tell students you can or you cannot use a particular bathroom.
The girls in the school that would actually try sometimes to go into the bathrooms just to get away from a boy, but now that's no longer possible because these boys can follow them right in.
Comprehensive sexuality education programs are disguised under many names. They may be called comprehensive sex or sexual education, education on human sexuality, reproductive health education, information on sexual and reproductive health, family life education, teen pregnancy prevention, rape prevention, anti-bullying programs, HIV/AIDS prevention, and sometimes even abstinence or abstinence plus education. CSE programs usually falsely claim to be age-appropriate, evidence-based, healthy sexuality education that will prevent teen pregnancy, sexual abuse, STDs, and HIV.
This is to help people, young people, avoid the dangers of HIV/AIDS in South Africa. And they were telling them how they could have non-penetrative sex, oral sex, experimenting. So how is helping people to avoid HIV/AIDS?
This pamphlet, or zine as they call it, is called Dry Humping Saves Lives. This means abstinence. So they suggest that children masturbate or masturbate in front of a mirror or in front of one another. Anal sex, oral sex, grinding, sleeping together, caressing, sexting. They suggest sexting, which would be getting your groove on, fluid-free, and again, this is abstinence to them, so they're actually encouraging sexual experience for children and calling it abstinence.
Sexual rights, sexual education movements began with Dr. Alfred C. Kinsey. He was a professor at Indiana University. His book, Sexual Behavior in the Human Male, purported to say that everyone in the world was engaged in massive sexual promiscuity, that it was a global pattern of sexual behavior. Kinsey claimed that the research published in his book proved that children are sexual from birth, that children could engage in sex with no downside, no problem at all. Kinsey actually had pedophiles measure with a stopwatch how many children could achieve what he called orgasms within a 24-hour period. In his book, Kinsey defines orgasm for these children as fainting, as having convulsions, as screaming, as fighting to get away from the partner, what he called the partner. Kinsey documented this sexual abuse of children on Table 34 in his book. Table 34 documents the sexual abuse by pedophiles of children from 5 months of age to 13 years, 317 children in that one table alone. The so-called research then, exploitation of these children, became the philosophies behind the entire structure of modern sexual education globally today. Today, comprehensive sexuality education is based on this philosophy that children are sexual from birth, created by Kinsey.
3 main organizations that promote Kinsey's harmful sexual philosophies are the Kinsey Institute, Planned Parenthood, and the Sexuality Information and Education Council of the United States, also known as SIECUS. In fact, Mary Calderon, the main founder of SIECUS, was the former medical director for Planned Parenthood, and a former Kinsey Institute director, Wardell Pomeroy, was also a founding board member of SIECUS. These 3 organizations are all accredited by the United Nations and use their UN status to promote Kinsey-based sexuality education to children across the world.
Say no to CSC! Say no to CSC! Say no to CSC! Say no to CSC!
We have tried to stop it. We have tried to break the consensus and ensure that comprehensive sexuality education has no place in the United Nations agreed language.
We've got to stop it. We've got to use everything at our disposal. We have to stand together to stop this attack against our children.
The material was exposed by one individual, and the entire nation got wind, and as a result of it, it had to be withdrawn.
Every well-thinking adult must be vigilant and must stand as a gatekeeper to our children's development.
Band together and find ways to stop it from entering your country.
We are trying to stop Planned Parenthood in Guatemala, and they have all this funding and this organization, but we know that if we stand together, we can do something for the family, for the children, for the future of the world.
We're in a battle. If this has not come to your state in a full way, I can tell you it's come to Minnesota, and we deal with it every single day.
As elected officials, if we can't rise and stand up and speak out on behalf of our children, our innocent children, what are we even doing? What are we even doing here?
We stopped the Kinsey sexuality education program in Croatia. I went to Croatia. I held up the Kinsey books in Parliament. I described to them the basis of the Kinsey books and held up the Children of Table 34. And the Constitutional Court banned that sex education program.
The American College of Pediatricians wants policymakers to understand this. When considering a sexuality education policy, be certain you specify that it be a sexual risk avoidance program. You must reject comprehensive sexuality education. We want to teach children to avoid all the risks, 100% of the risks, by avoiding early sexual behavior.
These people, whoever they are, who want to make the sexual only about the pleasure, are working to destroy everything we are building. We resist it, even with our lives, because that's what life is all about. It is time for parents to say, no, my family is mine. My wife is mine. I am hers. Our children are ours. They don't belong to the state. And people of different faiths can easily band together on this. I may be a devout Muslim. I understand this. I'm a devout Mormon. I understand this. I'm a devout Roman Catholic. I'm a devout evangelical. On this parental issue, we are all together.
Just understand, it's happening on our watch. If we don't do something about it, it is all of us that carry that guilt.
Men have to rise up, defend their family. On matters sexual, the fathers have got to stand up. Say, you have no place talking sexuality to my children.
We must let the world know the roots of this radical, destructive Kinseyan sexuality education. That is the only way we will be able to stop the corruption, the destruction of the world's children.
Family Watch International invites good people from all around the world to join us in this worldwide battle to protect the health and innocence of children. To learn more and to sign the petition to stop comprehensive sexuality education, go to stopcsc.org. You can also help by encouraging others to watch the documentary and sign the petition as well. Together, we can and will protect the world's children.
The time has come, the time is now for everyone to see that if we are to save the world, we must save the family.
All right, welcome back. I have to say, as overwhelming, well, very hard to watch as that information is, I love that it ends on such a positive note because this is up to us and we can fight back, which I have been promising is one of the key things that we will be talking about tonight with our guests. So I'm going to start by welcoming our first guest, which is Sharon Slater. She is a powerhouse in the global movement to protect marriage, family, and life. As president of Family Watch International and former head of United Families International, Sharon helped grow support from just 1,000 to over 400,000 people across the globe. She's led advocacy teams at the United Nations, authored the influential book Stand for the Family, and launched initiatives that have reached over 1 million people in 12 African nations with life-saving HIV/AIDS prevention education. Sharon is also a mother of 7, including 3 children orphaned by AIDS, and her work is driven by both personal conviction and a bold international vision. So please help me welcome Sharon Slater, who, by the way, is joining us from Turkey, right?
Yeah. Yes, sorry, don't have that great of a connection, so I won't turn on my video. But yes, I'm in Turkey right now at a conference on the family by the government.
That is amazing. I have to thank you so much for taking time to join in the middle of the night. to speak about this and from across the other side of the world. That's pretty awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Melissa,
And
for having me.
our next guest is another fantastic speaker who's going to help us out. It's Audrey Werner. She's a passionate advocate for protecting children and the founder of the Matthew 18 Group Ministry. With a background as a sex educator in Michigan, she has dedicated over 2 decades to educating parents, pastors, and church administrators on the origins and impacts of sex education. Audrey's journey began when she noticed alarming trends in child sexual activity and abuse, prompting her to research and expose the flawed foundations of modern sex education. So, welcome, Audrey Werner.
Thank you for
Hello.
having me. Hi, thank you for having me.
Very, very glad to have you here. We have some powerhouse women here to help us on this incredible, help us figure out some ways to fight back in this very, very important fight. One of the things I've had as takeaways from this film, which again, I just love that it ends on such a positive note because so much of these topics we address here at M4LU can really feel very dark and overwhelming. And it's good to know that we can fight back against it. I think one note that I'm sure we'll touch on later, but I find it incredible how deceptive this is. It seems like everything from the left is so good at co-opting language and making things sound so good. Like just the term of abstinence plus, but then you find out abstinence, it's not really abstinence as we would think of abstinence, abstaining from sexual activity. It is all of these other things that technically count as abstinence. That to me was really shocking. And even more so, I think, is the parental consent. The fact that these things can happen, this information can be given to children without parental consent. It's just horrific. So I have to start out and ask, how did you both get into this? Like what led you to create this film, Sharon, and how did you end up in this battle?
Well, thanks for that question. It actually happened when I went to the country of Mozambique and I met these 3 orphan children, and we ended up working towards their adoption. And as I was going back and forth to Mozambique, it took us 6, 7 years to adopt them. One day, my daughter Amelia came home from the school in Mozambique with this graphic, awful picture on how to have anal sex and oral sex under the guise of doing it safely. And I'm like, she was only 9 years old. And I
Oh my
was
goodness.
shocked that they would give her something like that. And then I started, as I was going to different African countries, looking at a HIV/AIDS prevention program we were implementing. And I saw that in the orphanages and in the schools, they were actually pushing this radical sexual agenda onto children. And I started investigating it and learning more. Then I came back to my home state of Arizona, and my daughter came home. My daughter, my biological daughter, came home with some radical graphic information about sex that was coming in her English class, no less. And I started seeing it everywhere I went, and this led me to start to study it and find it. And now we found it all over the world. And I was just at a conference in Kenya, and before that at a conference in Uganda. And there's not a place in the world I go where I can't find where they've been pushing this, either in the schools if they can get away with it, or the out of school programs if they can't, to try to hide it, or through whatever means they can. It's such a radical agenda.
That is, you touch on something really important there that I know we're going to get to later on, the out of classroom topics. But Audrey, your experience is actually, you did teach this at one point. Is that correct?
Right, right. I started teaching this when the AIDS epidemic was beginning in America in the 1980s, and that propelled the organizations that have been listed in the film to really push for sex education, because an AIDS epidemic, you get it through sex. So, my gosh, we have to get to the children. We have to teach them about oral sex and anal sex, which was not normal back in the 80s. That was not commonplace. other than in the LGBT lifestyle. So we were told abstinence was a myth, and we were told parents aren't doing their job, so we have to go in there and do it for them. So I did that for 5 years. And then in 1991, I had my first child, and I couldn't work full time anymore. I wanted to work part time. So I worked part time in the sexually transmitted disease clinic. So I was actually seeing the fruit of the labor, because I knew by that point we were doing more sex ed than we'd ever done in our country. And I was watching the more sex ed we did through the years, the lower the age of first sexual contact, the normalization of having sex outside of marriage, the date rape was exploding. And I thought, wait a minute, sex ed was supposed to help with the STDs and the pregnancy, and it's actually making it worse. So that's how I got into the deep dive. And Judith, who was in the film, is the one who trained me on the origins of sex education. And from there, it's been a wild ride.
I have had the pleasure of watching quite a few of, just as part of research for this, of interviews from you, and been able to see a lot from Judith as well. And she was really seemed like an incredible woman to have dedicated her life to fighting this. And you say something very interesting there that I want to ask both of you right away, because I feel like this is always one of the biggest arguments that I get as soon as I bring this topic up anywhere. And it's this, you called it the myth that parents aren't doing this. They aren't talking to their kids about it. So we have to, the educators have to. So this is still a common argument that I hear, literally, just like I said, talking to anyone in my circle. How do we push back against that? And is that actually true? Are there all these kids that have no idea about sex at all?
Well, I would answer. Actually, I talked to Judith about this, because parents do have difficulty talking about the graphic explanation of going into graphic details. And my parents struggled, so I was given a book. It was the first Christian sex ed book written, and it actually was, sad to say, when I went back and looked, it was based on Alfred Kinsey, Hugh Hefner, and Planned Parenthood had a say so in the program, which is true with all sex education, whether it's Christian or secular. And so, anyway, I asked Judith, I said, why is it that parents have such a difficult time talking to their kids graphically about sex? And she thought for a moment and she said, Audrey, when you talk to children about sex, you sexualize them to themselves, to adults, and to each other. And she said that is why parents can't do that. And I thought, sex education was meant to take away the moral innocence of our children. And, I heard it in the film talking about sex abuse in a way. It traumatizes children. I remember when I first was exposed to the sex ed program, my mind as a child, I can go back to when that happened and how traumatizing it was. So parents are meant to protect their children. They are not meant to sexualize their children. So that is why parents have such a difficult time. And if you look to prior to Alfred Kinsey, how did parents talk to their children about sex? It was in a very indirect, moderate way. It was through the flowers, the birds, and the bees. And we only shifted after Kinsey. So kind of interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting. Sharon, are you seeing things similarly international? Is is it just America with, I guess, when I did research on Kinsey, it was a lot of the post-Victorian era. So is it our Western society that was afraid to talk about it, or is this what are
Well,
you seeing
we hear
internationally?
the same argument. I call that the bad parent argument. For some reason, everybody falls for it all across the world. No, they'll use in Africa, they'll say, oh, well, we've had taboos about sex. Your parents can't teach you about sex. So we're going to come in here and we're going to teach you about sex so that you can protect yourself. And let's learn. I mean, I've studied so many CSE programs and analyzed them, and they all have the same pattern. they'll have the same kind of activities where they'll say, let's talk about sex. Let's now put up every sexual word that you've ever heard, and let's put it up on the board. And now let's discuss every sexual act, every sexual slang word. What they're really trying to do is do the opposite of what parents would do, and that's desensitize children to sexual things. Now, if you think about that, they're saying, okay, there's bad parents out there who aren't teaching their children. So that's why you need us to teach your children. But they're not going to just teach your children. That's their excuse for sexualizing the children and desensitizing them. These exercises that they put them through in comprehensive sexuality education programs have been compared to what the FBI says are the ways that you groom children. You desensitize them to sexual things. The exact very main principle that they try to get across in comprehensive sexuality education. So, first of all, it's like saying, let's add fuel to the fire because these parents, supposedly these bad parents, aren't giving enough information, and then they overload you with the fire hose of way too much information. What really should be done is maybe just helping parents guiding parents in how to do these things. It's been proven that when parents get involved in sex education, children are less likely to have sex. They're more likely to protect themselves. And so the parental involvement is the key element of a successful sex education program.
I think that right there is one of the big lies in society that has been pushed, is that parents, it's like the breakdown of the family, really, is what it seems to come down to. That parents should just stay out. You don't really have any influence on your kids. You're stupid. You're not hip. You're a boomer, whatever. Like you can't possibly relate to this generation. And if you're not a good parent, is someone who's just going to be a friend. And that's really not what we're supposed to do as parents. And I think that I like the name of that, the bad parent argument. I think that it ties in April we talked about gender ideology, and that was something that came up, was the idea of uh, saying that school counselors were like the safe, or teachers were safe people to talk to, implying that parents were not safe to talk to with any questions about that. And it's those underhanded kind of deceptive messages, that implicit messages, that are really unfortunate. That is, well, it's unfortunate to say, but it's not too surprising, I guess, that it's really a worldwide thing. This seems like a humanity problem with human nature,
Now,
unfortunately.
I should add that in Turkey here, it's really interesting. They haven't had sex education in the schools, and they have way less problems with sexual issues. I mean, because it's
Wow.
not being thrown on the children too early. It's not being thrown on them at all. And so you can take Turkey as a good example.
It's awesome, actually. That I think it makes sense, because as soon as well, I think you say it in the movie, right? That as soon as a child is exposed to these images, that's imprinted on their mind, it sits with them, it stays with them. So it's going to, if nothing else, then they have these devices that you can look up anything, and now you have
Yeah,
answers to
and the
things.
other bad parent argument, they take these devices and they say, well, the children are going to learn. They're learning it anyway, so now we have to teach them even more about it, right? No,
Yes.
just because they're getting too much of one thing doesn't mean we need to give them more of too much of one thing, if that makes sense.
I'm so glad you said that, because that is another argument that I don't think of as often, but that is exactly right. That, oh, well, they're going to hear it anyway, so we might, it's like, what is it, that kids are going to have sex anyway, so we should just give them condoms, which to me is just insane. But I know that is a big argument that is used. So I appreciate you bringing that up. That's really important. Okay, so I know we have a bunch of questions already from our audience, so I will ask our wonderful moderator to bring up our first question, please. All right, what is the justification for including sexual pleasure in early CSE lessons when research shows young children aren't cognitively or emotionally ready for such topics? That one, I just have to say real quick, I was horrified when I saw that was being pushed, the idea of pleasure for young children. I think that's awful.
Well,
would
and I
say,
think I would say, and I know Sharon's got a big answer for that one, you know, sex education, it boils down to it is grooming. It is grooming children for sex. So, you know, it's used by pedophiles. It is used by a society now that believes Kinsey, that children are sexual from birth. So the fact that they would use that is to groom all children for child sex trafficking, for sex with adults, sex with each other. There's an intention behind that. It's not that they're just haphazardly doing this. There's a plan behind that.
yeah, Planned Parenthood is the premier. I don't know if most people don't know in the U.S. that International Planned Parenthood Federation is the mothership of Planned Parenthood, and they have 60,000 service points in 160 countries. You know, they're global, and they're the main mechanism through which radical sexuality education is pushed everywhere, and they're the big purveyors of the importance of teaching sexual pleasure to children. If you go to our website at stopcsc.org, we have a list of 15 harmful elements that we have found are usually in most CSE programs, and teaching them about sexual pleasure and how to obtain sexual pleasure is a key component of sex education. And their philosophy of Planned Parenthood, they actually say that children, in their Exclaim publication, you can find it online, that children are entitled to sexual pleasure, and having different forms of sexual pleasure are important to their health and well-being. So they believe if they're not having sexual pleasurable experiences, that they're not having health. So these people,
Wow.
just hearing that, you can imagine how twisted and I guess corrupted their minds are, and then to push that onto children. And that's exactly what we see globally in countries all around the world. This is what they're pushing. Let me just give you one of the worst examples, and I'm sorry to bring this up, but I mean, the European Commission's logo is on this, multiple European countries, UNFPA's logo is on this, but it's a manual for out of school children, because they probably can't get it through the schools because the schools won't teach it, to Zimbabwe children, all the way in Africa, if you can imagine. And what it does is it slowly separates children from their parents' values by teaching them values relativism and telling them they don't have to have the same values as their parents and their religion. They can choose their own values. And by the way, there are sexual values that everybody agrees to. They're called human rights, and they're called sexual and reproductive health and rights. And in order to realize them, you have to have sexual knowledge. And in order to have sexual knowledge, here are a list of about 20 sexual patterns that you need to learn about. And those include voyeurism, exhibitionism, pederasty, sexual pleasure with dead corpses, with feces, with urine. I mean, who in their right mind would even introduce something like that? And that's meant for starting at age 10. This
Oh my gosh.
This is you can go to our website, you can find that manual, you can see it at stopcsc.org. You click on the materials exposed page, and by the way, if you look on the left-hand column, that's where the international programs are analyzed. If you go on the right-hand column of the materials exposed page, you'll see where the US funded and US distributed CSE programs are pushed, and we analyze them all against the 15 harmful elements. But this agenda is so corrupt, so depraved, I mean, this is child abuse, is what it really is. And again, this has the European Commission's logo is on it, multiple UNFPA, the United Nations Fund for Population Activity, multiple European countries. I mean, it's beyond the pale of what most people could even possibly imagine is what they think should be taught to children.
That's just that. I mean, it's beyond atrocious. It really is. It's the so I have brought this up to again to friends trying to just talk to my circle about this because I'm I'm from a bit of an old school maybe in that we have friends who we're not in an echo chamber. Like we have friends who don't necessarily agree with us on absolutely every political point, which I think is great. But it is interesting how many people are genuinely unaware of those kind of topics. I didn't even realize I went to that extreme. That's terrible. So what I'm curious is how can you respond, or how do we respond? Because while it is intentional, and Audrey, I agree with you, it is intentional, it's clear, but clearly there have to be some people who are just tricked into this, and they can't actually believe that this is a good thing for kids, or do they? How do we respond to that?
There are. I mean, and this goes back to good and evil. There is the satanic side and there is the God side, and the people who are involved with this. Some of them are, humanist, communist, eugenics, Satanism is common themes among them, and they see nothing wrong with raping an infant. So knowledge is consent. And if you look at it from the legal part, Judith was working on legislation, and that's what I testify for different bills. But it actually says in some of these dialogue between the lawyers is that the American Law Institute would like to, in America, push down the age of consent to 10 years old. And and they use the phrase knowledge is consent. Well, how do children get knowledge on sex? Through sex education, through these programs that were exposed in the film. These are ways, even just the books in the library. Why are the kids bombarded with all of these books in the libraries that have so much sexual content to them? And that's to educate them, because this other side sees no harm in having sex with children. They have totally embraced the Kinsey mindset. And so this is deliberate. They want our children. They want the minds of our children. I think I can't remember if I shared this with you before, but when I was doing my research, I found a book that was written by a woman in 1971. Sex ed officially went into the schools in America in the mid 1960s. The Christian sex ed program I referenced to that I saw as a child, that went into the schools in the late 60s, early 70s. But this reporter, she was reporting on sex ed, what it had done to America already from 1964 to 1971. And she said in one of the sex ed curriculas, the Time of Your Life series, they predicted by the year 2000 there'd be no more organized religions, and fathers would no longer have a place in the home. So ultimately, these people wanted to destroy, and this is how they do it. They destroy societies where you have to take out the churches and you have to take out the traditional families. Once you've destroyed that, you can easily take over a society. And that's where these people are headed. They want us to be destroyed so that we will all become, one world, a one world order. When you look at the UN and their agenda for this one world order, it's critical that you put sex information in the schools for the children, because this is how you destroy countries, societies. And look at where America's, what we were before and where we are now, this area of morality. It's atrocious.
Missy, I wonder if we could bring up something too, and that is, hand in hand with this agenda is the agenda to abolish parental consent and a parental authority or protection over their children. And if you go to stopcsc.org/UNICEF, we did a campaign to expose UNICEF, which is the UN agency that's supposed to protect the world's children. But they have a document up there that you can see about, they're actually saying that you have to take away parental consent for sex education because children have what is called this evolving capacity to maybe become more like adults earlier than others might. And so you need to be able to, like the Planned Parenthood clinician needs to be able to decide whether a child's capacity has evolved so much that they don't need parental consent for abortion, for contraceptives. So, you're talking about, where does such agenda come from? Well, what does Planned Parenthood profit from? Well, all those things, from contraceptives, from condoms, from abortions. We know in the US they're selling aborted body parts. And then now even the hormones. Planned Parenthood is one of the biggest purveyors of transgender hormones, which, imagine trying to keep up and maintain your so-called gender by having to take hormones every month of your, every day of your life, or however often you have to take them. This is a lot of money that is being made off of sexualizing the children. So you have that one side of the equation. These people are trying to sexualize the children for a lot of nefarious reasons. But as you say, there's a lot of people who get caught up and believe what they're saying. They believe the false and I guess distorted data and studies that they're putting out there that are claiming that comprehensive sexuality education will delay sexual debut. It will prevent teen pregnancy. It will stop, sexual abuse. And there's multiple studies out there that they are pointing to that say it will do these things. Well, we commissioned a $50,000 study to look at the very data that they were citing to make all these claims. And if you go to our website too at stopcc.org, and you look at the Defender's Toolkit and you click on research, you will see what they found. And it's just black and white there that you can show that this data, it was distorted and it was reported incorrectly, and that the real data shows that there is no evidence that that school-based comprehensive sexuality education prevents STDs or teen pregnancy. And the opposite, of course, is true. Well, duh, when you look at the curriculum, that it actually increased sexual risk taking rather than decreases it. But people get confused. If you today are a college student and you have to debate, what sex education is best for children, and you Google comprehensive sexuality education, the lies out there, are so prevailing that you almost couldn't even find our study, and you would never know that these things are distorted, and you would never know. But I think anybody who wants to be in this space and help needs to understand the status of the studies, and they should really go to that stopcc.org, click on the toolkit, click on the research, because we have to keep up with it, because there's always new false studies coming out saying that, for example, the big movement in the world, especially internationally and especially being pushed by the United Nations in Africa and in developing countries, is we've got to stop gender-based violence, sexual and gender-based violence. Well, there was this Goldfarb-Lieberman study that supposedly came out and said that CSE will prevent date rape. It will prevent, all these sexual violence. And when we had these experts from this independent entity, the Institute for Research and Evaluation, look at the studies that they cited to make this overall claim that after 30 years, this is what they found of looking at all the data. Most of the studies they cited to weren't even sex education programs. They were sexual abuse programs that had nothing to do about even teaching about sexual acts or sex education or the 15 harmful elements that we find in comprehensive sex education. And even the ones that were didn't even find what they said that it found. And just to add one more thing, right now this week in Geneva at the World Health Assembly, the world is supposed to adopt the Pandemic Treaty. Now, in one of the first paragraphs of the Pandemic Treaty, it recognizes the World Health Organization as the international authority for the whole world, on health issues. Well, the World Health Organization did a study trying to refute the study we commissioned. They worked for 5 years and came up with this huge attack on the study we commissioned. They are steeped in this agenda in sexualizing children. They have a whole division, the World Health Organization does, on comprehensive sexuality education. And many people are being fooled by them, are being looking at their data when it's really totally skewed. And when I hear people talking about the World Health Organization, the pandemic treaty, and that they should be the ones who should be, coming in when there's COVID-19 or these kind of things, all I can think about is if they could get it so wrong on the children that they could be radically promoting to comprehensive sexuality education across the world, how wrong can they be on everything else that they might
Oh,
try to
yeah.
do, like the pandemic treaty? That's just something to think about as the world's about to adopt this treaty, and give a lot of authority to the World Health Organization. There is not a UN agency that has not been corrupted, that's not pushing this agenda, funded by the European nations. It was funded by our um, uh, government under the Biden administration, the Obama administration, the Clinton administrations. In fact, the amount of money going through USAID to push radical, comprehensive sexuality education all across the developing world and developing countries is unconscionable. I mean, it's just, I did a study 6 months before Trump was put into office. We had our director from Africa come and do a congressional behind the scenes hearing to expose, like, we had this situation where, like, Planned Parenthood would be getting a grant for like $100 million. They'd have seven grantees under them. Then one of those seven grantees would get a $50 million grant and have all of their friends under there. And they're like this incestuous, amount of funding. So in any conversation regarding that, we need to look at, first of all, the real data. We have, we've got the arguments on our side if you learn about the data. And then we've got to be responsible for our own tax dollars, that was going internationally to this funding, and $101 million annually under the appropriations in the US government and budgeting that's going to CSE in our own country.
So
And
I have to
go
I
ahead.
have to ask real quick. So in addition to this, I see a question in the chat that I want
Yeah.
to get to is because while it's funding for it in the classrooms as well. One of the things you mentioned already is taking this outside of the classroom. And there was I think in the pamphlet or in the movie they talk about this a lot about recruiting educators, peer educators.
Mhm.
That's something that obviously Moms for Liberty's main focus is our mission is really focused on the classroom, but that's scary because that's outside the classroom. That's something. How do we fight back against that? How do you proactively protect your children against something like that?
Well, I was going to say in Turkey, because they can't get it through the regular channels,
Mhm.
they've gone underground here through the peer-to-peer education programs. And that's,
Wow.
I think that's more used in other, developing countries where they can manipulate on the ground easily. But what they do also in the developing countries and in the US is the after school programs. They're really manipulating those. And so
Yeah.
that's where you need to really look, is the after school programs, is the clubs that they're able to start. That's their big new avenue if they can't get it openly and directly through your own school districts and your own curriculum in your school during the school day.
Are you seeing anything as far as extracurricular activities or programs, ways that we could fight against that, or how parents could step in front of that?
Well, again, a parent, it's tough to be a parent today because you have to be so vigilant. And I noticed I was looking in the questions, and someone had asked, how this can be in the each state. Are they mandatorily teaching? And we came across a law. It's called the obscenity exemption law, and it was in 43 out of the 50 states, which said that it's illegal if your next door neighbor showed your child pornography, they would go to jail. However, there's an exemption. If a teacher or a librarian shows your child pornography, it is exempt, meaning that they will not be put in jail for that because it's being used for educational purposes. So, of course, that law was based on Kinsey. And I live here in Texas, and I'm happy to say that Texas is now one of those, I think there's 7 or 8 states that have repealed the obscenity exemption. And our Senate and our House, I just testified for these bills. The Senate and the House have voted to repeal this law. So now it's going to our governor's desk to be signed. So it's in every subject. I mean, they can bring in this graphic information in every subject. So parents have to be very diligent to look at their child's curricula. Now everything's online. So, and I think that one positive thing from the pandemic is a lot of parents got to see what their children were getting, the content in the schools, which was a great wake up call. You have a right as a parent to review curricula, to go into the school libraries and see what type they have. You can go into your public library in your community and look at these, look at the young teen section, and you will be appalled at the amount of sexuality material that is there. So parents have to be very diligent in looking at it. Yes, it's out of school programs. It's even, I have had some of the worst have been the youth pastors in the churches who are like, well,
Really?
we'll take it, we'll do it. And I was a member of one church where they came in and used a program that was based on from an LGBT source. So they came in and they said, well, we'll just edit out the parts that, and it's like, well, a little leaven can corrupt a whole loaf. So if we're going to talk about sexuality with youth, let's talk from the Bible and the Bible alone. If you're in a church, that's where that should be coming from. So
Yeah, that you hit a really, really important point, which I think most of well, I don't know, actually, I don't want to speak for everyone, but the obscenity exemption laws are really, truly the one of the biggest roots of evil for this, in my opinion. I think like we can fight all we want against pulling these books out of school libraries at least, but the fact of the matter is, like when the law says that they can do it, well, we have to change the law. We have to get that changed. And I think a lot of I did not know about that until I'd say semi recently. And that was once I found that out, I was just absolutely floored. I don't think a lot of people know that. I really don't. I don't think that a lot of
They
parents
don't.
realize
And Missy,
that.
I'd like to, this might be overwhelming for people who are listening and feeling like, like there's no hope. But I would like to let people know that there is a coalition in the US that Audrey's a part of, that we invite, Liberty Moms and any good groups to be a part of. And if you go to protectchildhealth.org, you can learn a little bit about that coalition. And we have monthly support groups. We share each other's ideas and successes, but that's where the big push is amongst our colleagues in various states across the U.S. that are all working to end the obscenity exemptions in their states. And we have a plan, and we have groups that are working on that. So if anybody is interested in getting help and support to remove your obscenity exemption, we would invite you to join us at protectchildhealth.org. There's a button where you can, apply to join either as an individual or as a group. Because really, when we all work together amongst all the different organizations working together in coalitions, there's a lot of power and there's a lot of unity. We also have a summit where we provide training and expertise and speakers once a year as part of the Protect Child Health Coalition.
Awesome. I'm so glad and I'm now going to pivot a little bit because I promised everybody that one of the best things about tonight is that we're going to talk about some ways to fight back, things that we can do, how like some actual solutions to this, because you absolutely just hit the nail on the head that this was a very dark month. I said that at the beginning of CSE 101. I was surprised at how dark it was to research this and realize that this is even a thing, because to me it always felt like, well, surely we can all come together and agree that we shouldn't be sexualizing the children, we should be protecting our kids. And then when you realize, no, it's actually a very, very intentional agenda, it's heartbreaking, quite frankly. um So let's take a quick pivot and just talk a little bit about what are some things that parents can be doing? How can we find this information? I know we've got a couple questions about that, of like finding the information in schools. What can we do to fight back? We talked a little bit about the obscenity exemption laws and this coalition that we can join to find other help. What are some action items that we can do? What's some positive stuff?
Well, I think the first thing is to be educated, which I commend all of you who are on this, because this is a great way. Because, the scripture, my people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. And we need to be educated on this. Secondly, we have to recognize we are children of the sexual revolution. The revolution was started to destroy America, and it really began in the 1920s, but it was in full force in the 1960s. And I'm going to bet a majority of the parents on here are from 1960 on. I would be 1961. I'll give up my age, but so where do you start? When I speak to parents, I do a talk called "You Can Raise Pure Kids in Today's Culture." And so the question is, well, how do we do that? Because a lot of our generation and younger if you understand that all of these sexual messages, imagery, pornography, everything that's out there is to lead us toward sexual sin. So parents will say, I messed up in that area when I was younger. How can I possibly teach my children about purity, chastity, modesty, self-control? And that's where, as a Christian, we need to take that to the cross, repent, give it to Jesus, and he heals you of that, so you can turn around and then help your child. So I wrote a book called 10 Tips on How Not to Talk to Your Kids About Sex. Oh,
Which
good,
I'm
you
very
got the
excited to
book.
have. Yes, thank you.
And that is on Amazon. So that's to help parents. That was a tool that I had to help parents. And then I would add, you spread the word, because you need to let other people know this. And you do come in a community. Now in Texas, there's a whole host of parents that are going down and testifying. And I started this with, I'm just a mom. Nobody's going to listen to me. And I just started with small groups of parents, and I started sharing the information I know. And then I realized that the Christian sex ed was based on Kinsey. So, my group is named Matthew 18, and that's after Matthew 18, 15 to 17. If your brother's sinning, you go to him. If they don't listen, you go with someone else. Then you take it to the church. So that was where my starting point was, trying to wake up the church to these issues. And I'll say that, when you're like, okay, Lord, this is heavy. This is really heavy. Where do I go with this, and what do I do? So first and foremost, your family, protect your family, and fight for them. They are worth fighting for. This is a global attack on our children, and it is very deliberate in what they're doing. So, I was on my knees saying, okay, Lord, where do I go from here? And he opened some incredible doors where I ended up writing a brief for the Supreme Court, which is on my website. So I got to educate our U.S. Supreme Court justices thanks to Sharon. She put a bug in. I was going over to Uganda to speak at a church, and I ended up with a full-blown speaking tour because of Sharon. And it happened to be at the moment that Uganda was about to cave because of all the organizations she's talking about. And at that moment, they were about to put sex ed in all of their schools. And I like to say, a mama, with the help of Almighty God, went up against Planned Parenthood International and the UN, and God halted sex ed from going into their schools. So, God, if he can use one mama for Uganda, what can he do with 10 righteous people in America? So don't get discouraged by this. I mean, we are here for such a time as this, and we have got that. Jesus doesn't say in Ephesians 6, sit this one out, because it's too big of a problem. Rather, he says stand, and we are to stand and fight for our kids. Yeah.
I love that. And you say that, there's a small portion. That's what Seth Gruber was saying last week on CSC 102, that, a small a small portion is able to really have a huge impact, and that can happen
Exactly.
on the positive side too. Okay,
Yes.
Sharon, sorry, go ahead. Let me hand it
Okay.
over to you.
Well, I guess because you said the word stand, I wasn't going to say this, but I've written a book called Stand for the Family, a call to responsible citizens everywhere. And you can get it on our website at familywatch.org. But it does take you, you said get educated, get informed, sign up for our newsletter at familywatch.org and understand what's happening all around the world with our free newswire that will come to you. That will be a great tool. But I would say the first place you want to start is in your own home. How do you immunize your children against these assaults? It's been proven. Family dinners, talking to your children, asking them questions, talking to them about sexual things, because nowadays we do have to talk to them, but it needs to be coming from our own parental values and our own family values, and preparing them for what is going to be coming to them at the schools. We're not going to be able to prevent it from coming to them completely, so we need to prepare them. That's number one. Number two, we've tried to create as many tools as possible to help parents fight this agenda. So if you go to stopcsc.org, you've got that documentary. Share the link, share it as far and as wide as you can, but then go to the Defender's Toolkit. If you click on that, the first tool that we have is a Stop CSE plan. And that's a step-by-step plan that a mom could follow. And first, identifying what's in her school. You need to go to your school, see what's there, what you need to keep out or keep in. If you happen to have good sex ed, that's a good thing. But then you need to join with others. And if you stand alone, it's much harder to do things. But if you educate and inform other parents and organize them, we give you tips on what to do at a school board meeting or a district meeting, the do's and don'ts, even talking points that have been used, the tsunami approach that's been used successfully. And then there's lots of information and tools with PowerPoints. But probably the greatest tool we have is the USA map. It's a Stop CSE USA map. If you go to Stop CSE and click on the top again, you'll find the USA map. Click on your state, and you'll find what your state laws are relating to this, even whether you have a state obscenity exemption or not. You'll find the curriculum that's been federally funded by the US government. Every year, there's Planned Parenthood entities in your states getting grants and all their allies, and they're trying to come in as guest speakers and getting it to your children. So you can find the exact amount of money they got, which entities got it, what the programs are that they're teaching. Then you click on those programs, and we'll even have an analysis of those for you. They'll be analyzed and scored 15 out of 15 or 12 out of 15, depending on how many harmful elements they have. We even have PowerPoints with depictions of what's in the curriculum that you can take to the school board and show them. The greatest tool that we've ever had that always seems to work if you want to remove comprehensive sexuality education is to simply show them the manuals. Show them what's there. And usually, more than often than not, good people will stand up and join you, and they'll root them out. And
Yeah.
that's the most successful way to do it, is to actually show the curriculum to all the parents and make the public aware of it.
That is so encouraging. And we have everyone, we have Stop CSE website linked on our m4lu.org under the resource library and our toolkit for this month. But the toolkit on stopcsc.org is fantastic. Please check it out. It's absolutely incredible. And I think that is so true so one, preparing your family. Really, we need to take care of our kids at home, right? One of the things we all know, we talk about, pulling your kids out of school or whatever, but and it's not for everyone. It can't work for everyone, but you have to remember, like, you can't send your kids into war all the time. I mean, some of this is legitimately a war, and you have to be able to look at those battle lines and see where it's drawn. But if you can fight, because something I will encourage every parent, grandparent, citizen, someone who doesn't have kids right now, or they might have them in the future, or maybe their kids are all adults, the thing that's important to remember why this is so critical for us all to be involved is because we're still living in the society where these kids are getting taught. So you will be impacted. Whether or not you think you're impacted now, you're going to be impacted at some point in time, because today's children and students will be tomorrow's legislators. And we need to be very, very vigilant to protect them, because if we, as Christians or Bible believing, anyone who is religious and has good values, remove ourselves from society, from politics, then that void will be filled with something that doesn't have the same values as us, very clearly. So, well, this has been fantastic. I really appreciate you both coming on, and Sharon especially coming on in the middle of the night. Really appreciate you joining us from Turkey. Let me give you a chance to say any final statements, any thoughts or anything you'd like to share, and then where people can find you each. And Sharon, I'll start with you.
Yeah, anyone within the sound of my voice, when I got involved in this cause, I was a mom. I had no experience, never been involved politically, never been involved in the PTA even there, I'm embarrassed to say. But what I learned was very quickly is that one person can have a big impact. And I've seen this over and over and over again, where if one person speaks up, usually people will join you, and then it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. So I just want to really emphasize the power that everyone listening has to do good in this area and to protect children, and the power of prayer. Our organization is a non-religious organization. We take our positions based on social science data and medical facts and what proves to bring the best outcomes for men, women, and children. But personally, I am a Christian, and I believe in prayer. And I know that with God's help, that you will be led to do what you can do in your sphere of influence, and that your efforts can be magnified 100 times, 1,000 times. I'm shocked at all the good that, even like here we have Audrey, when she went to Uganda, and all the good she was able to do. Just one person who agreed to go do that. And then second of all, just please use our resources. Go to familywatch.org, sign up for our newsletter, go to stopcsc.org, because so much work has gone in to preparing all of these things just for you, to help you to protect your own children and the children around you.
Thank you so much. Audrey, any final thoughts?
Yeah, and I Sharon's been doing a great job of promoting all the websites. I haven't said mine once. So it is Matthew18.org. So you can go to my website. The presentation I did to Uganda Parliament, a presentation I did at a seminary to seminarian students. So and then resources are on there as well. So feel free to check out our website, and my book is also available on our website as well. I just want to encourage you that with God, all things are possible. And I know, it looks pretty bad right now, but we're seeing a shift. I took a busload of people to the state capitol, and I've started an event because I looked at each state, threw out God's law, and brought in the Kinsey-based model penal code, which removed protections for marriage of women and children in every state. So I said, okay, let's start going to the Capitol. We found the room that the Texas legislators made that decision. So every year we go in there and we pray for God to restore his law in America. And it's going to start in that courtroom. It's going to spread across our Capitol building, across the state, and across America. And I will tell you that the ground was shaking. I mean, God was present we just did it on Friday, May 16th. And it was amazing. It was amazing. There is a seismic shift coming, but we've got to be calling out to God, and we've got to be This is a God-sized problem. No one individual can't do it, but God can use one individual. Like I said, in Uganda, God can use one person, but it takes us saying, "Okay, Lord, let me," like Gideon, we have to clean up our own family first. We have to not be watching, graphic shows. We can't be in pornography. We got to get out of that. We've got to be right with the Lord, and then we can turn around and raise up the next generation. And I say to our kids today, I say, you guys are under more attack than any previous generation, but I believe that Satan's working so hard on you guys because you're the generation that's going to bring this nation back. And start commissioning them. They are made in the image and likeness of God. They are either male or female as he created them, and we need to emphasize that. So the Bible has a lot to say on all the moral issues that are out there right now. We just got to get back and get knowledgeable about God's word on these things too.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. And we dropped the link to both websites in the chat, so everyone should be able to get to them. Please go and visit these incredible websites. There's so many good resources there for all of you to help in this fight. And thank you both so much for joining us, Audrey and Sharon. We really appreciate you joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Missy, for your leadership in this and your organization's desire to help parents fight this battle. We're so grateful.
We're not giving up. We're going to fight
That's
hard.
right.
That's right.
Amen.
Thank you. Okay.
Well, thank you all so much for joining us. This has been the M4LU virtual watch party of the war on children, which it is. It is a war on our children today, but we can fight back. As we had some amazing resources presented tonight. I'm so excited. Of course, m4lu.org has a resource library with a toolkit specifically for each month that we're facing or topic that we're covering each month. And we have our CSE toolkit up there live for you to be able to access. And a lot of those resources are the ones that were mentioned tonight because, frankly, they're phenomenal. They're so good. So go and check out Matthew18.org. And that is Matthew and the number 18, not the Roman numerals, but the number 18.org. And then stopcsc.org are the two main ones that you're going to want to check out, in addition to m4lu.org, of course. So far, just a quick recap, we have had CSE 101. You can catch all of these, by the way, on the Moms for Liberty YouTube channel. We had an incredible kickoff to the month with Rebecca Ose from CFAM and Monica Klein from It Takes a Family. It was a fantastic evening. And then, of course, Erin Brewer spoke as well, talking about just introducing us all to comprehensive sexuality education overall. Then last week, we had Kelly Shankoski and Seth Gruber on CSC 102. Tonight was our watch party. And next week, on the 29th, so the day after Memorial Day, when you guys are all relaxing, hopefully, and recovering from wonderful weekends, we'll be doing our book club discussion with You're Teaching My Child What, featuring author Dr. Miriam Grossman. And this is a really, really impactful book. I strongly encourage you to check it out. It's an easy read. It's very, very easy to understand. And if you don't have a ton of time, although I will say the audiobook in particular was really good for it. I listen to most of my stuff on audio. But on our website, if you go to m4lu.org and check out this event, we have a number of book reviews that also do a quick recap on it. So thank you all again for joining us. Please consider becoming a member to support Moms for Liberty. And of course, as was famously said by James Madison, the advancement and diffusion of knowledge is the only true guardian of liberty. That is the mission of M4LU and why we are here today. Thank you again, and we'll see you next time.